Thank you for joining us today for the Brother to Brother segment with the 100 Black Men of Atlanta. We're honored today to have our chairman, Milton Jones, and also he was Chairman Emeritus of the 100 Black Men of Atlanta. Milton, today we want to just honor you and speak with you, give us a little history about yourself, also about the vision of what you see on the national level and also the local chapter and how we could work together to benefit the community.
Well, Luis, the honor's all mine for being here. I relish every opportunity I get to talk with leaders like you and others around the country that are part of this great movement that we have and around the world, actually. And so it is a pleasure to be here, and always fun to come back home to my home chapter, which I enjoyed having the opportunity to lead, as you know, and to be very active in and still remain active in as a way of keeping me, connected to the movement there locally and nationally.
Yeah. Well, if we could start, I know you said you grew up in Simpson Road. If you could just give us a little clarity about what it was like for you growing up in Atlanta at that time, and
Sure.
then kind of how you matriculated up to get to where you're at today.
Well, I appreciate the question. I actually grew up, it was Simpson Road, it's now Joseph E. Boone Boulevard, and it's interesting, there's organizations talking about, kind of creating a positive West End, and some of us would argue it's a matter of restoring. At one time, there were black businesses on that street. At one time, you could buy groceries on that street. There was a black-owned drugstore. But on the other hand, in the 50s, you couldn't go downtown. You couldn't shop at white stores in peace. And so it was a tale of two cities of a sort. I grew up, when I was 5 years old, I went to the Fox Theater for the first time, had to go up the fire escape steps because that's how black people went in. But a lot of people don't even know that's on the side of the theater on Ponce. But that changed over time. And so we saw, I was able to see the civil rights movement, not by reading about it and seeing it on TV, but by living it. My sister was arrested, sitting in at Woolworth's, and there's a session at the Civil and Human Rights Museum about a section of the Civil and Human Rights Museum that reactivates that. And so I learned a lot. And growing up next door to the heralded Coach Epps of Clark College, now Clark AU, I learned a lot about HBCUs, and so between going to the games and meeting the players and being mentored by Coach Epps and others, Atlanta for me was a city that offered a lot of growth opportunity as a young person, and I benefited from the strength of the village. And I never forgot that, and I think it certainly got me off to a great start. And I was blessed to have two parents, my mother and father, and an older sister. And my grandmother, who all lived in our little house, and we talked with each other and we learned from each other. So as I saw Atlanta change, and I went to high school downtown in Atlanta. My high school was literally at Cortlandt and Baker, which is now where there's a big parking deck. But by going to high school downtown, I got a chance to see another part of the city, and so as such, watching that change, I watched the Hyatt being built, believe it or not. And so now it makes it sound like I'm really ancient, doesn't it? But the fact is, I watched the buildings change. I watched the growth develop. I watched a great Mayor Jackson come in and drive change. And all of that was a part of sort of what kind of gave me my start and set my expectations of both myself and of the world in terms of how I should behave, how I could grow, but also how I should help others grow.
Yes.
And that's really what got me involved in the 100.
Well, great. And I know you had talked about you went into banking. So have you always had acumen for numbers? Was that something that came easy for you? And what attracted you to that world of finance? I think you were an accountant first, if I'm not mistaken.
Guilty as charged. I graduated from Notre Dame with a degree in accounting. And I went to work for what was then Peat Marwick Mitchell, which is now KPMG. And so I was in public accounting for 3 years. And then I went into banking at then CNS Bank, which became CNS Sovereign, which became Nations Bank, which became Bank of America. And numbers always came easy for me. And so, people talked about that when I was in business meetings. They go like, you don't even use a calculator, you got that figured out. Well, it just kind of comes that way. But yeah, that's a part of me. And when numbers are a part of you, people think you don't have heart. Mm-hmm. But I have a lot of heart. And so it's a matter of kind of that being a secret weapon, the fact that I do know how to care, even when people think I don't. So.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, how did you get involved with our chapter here at the 100? I know this was your hometown. I think you were in Charlotte, or yeah, moved away, and then I know you wanted to accomplish some things first in the banking world before you came back and made that commitment with us.
Well, actually, a little bit, almost a little bit around that.
Is it? Okay.
So
Okay.
let me talk about that a minute. I joined the Atlanta chapter in the spring of, at the retreat of 1997. I was brought in, and a month later, I was transferred by the bank to Greensboro. And I went up to Greensboro as president of Dealer Financial Services, but I stayed involved in the chapter. I'd come home to meetings and that sort of thing. And then I got moved back to Atlanta. Unfortunately, the job I moved back to Atlanta with, I had to travel all over the place because I was running technology infrastructure worldwide for then Nations Bank. I was named president of all banking for Georgia and Tennessee, so I was home more. Yes. I became much more active, and then took on the role of chairing the Atlanta Football Classic for the Atlanta chapter, and did that for 5 years. Yes. But oddly enough, as soon as I took on the role as chair, the bank moved me to Charlotte. And so I actually ran the Football Classic by conference call through the summer, and then came to Atlanta, took a week off from the bank, and came on the ground and helped bring everything together. Yes. And that was only possible because there was so much cooperation, so much involvement by the brothers in the 100. People knew what they had to do. They did what they had to do. We could talk, and just almost finish each other's sentences. We were just that close as a group of brothers working on that project, which was the lead fundraiser. Yes. For the chapter for 5 years. Yes.
So what would you say were some of the things when you first came in '97? Who were some of the older members, the elder members that maybe imparted wisdom in your ear? And if you could share some of that with us.
There were so many members who I just learned so much from. Tommy Dortch, of course. And at that time, I really wasn't involved at the national level. I mean, I was involved at the local level, but this chapter was so strong, so rich with leaders like Tommy Dortch, Curly Dossman, Bob Haley, Bernard Perche, that were all leaders of the chapter. I remember getting into a really interesting conversation with Bernard Perche about subprime lending, and I think I finally persuaded him. He either got tired of arguing with me or he agreed with me, one or the other. But my argument was that subprime lending took advantage of us as a people. Mm-hmm. They put us in situations that weren't fair, right. and history proved that to be the case, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But that said, just talking to them, Daryl Fitzgerald, Bill Stanley, a lot of them were people I had known in the city anyway, and I'd gotten to know a lot of these brothers as leaders in one activity or another. But it was just great to be in this organization with them, and then to begin to work with others who came along, behind me, to where we were all kind of bonding together. So I'd say I spent my first 2 or 3 years just learning, just saying, hey, how do we work? What do we do? Because at that point, everybody we had a class we were mentoring, and all the mentees were taken. So my best way of contributing was to use the talents I had around finance. So I was involved with the finance committee and around raising money and around leading the football classic. Mm-hmm. But I got the opportunity to talk with young people in groups, and I found that to be a connecting activity as well.
No, thank you for sharing. Yeah. And I was going to say, I do know that you currently are chair of UNCF. And can you talk about how you ascended into getting to work with HBCUs and the work you do there, and how that relates to us here at the 100?
Absolutely, and the organizations are aligned in a lot of ways in our values and in our goals. I went on the board of UNCF because I was the highest ranking African American in banking, actually, and when Michael Lomax, the CFO of Bank of America, Jim Hance, retired, Michael came down who's a CEO of UNCF, came down to Charlotte and talked about what UNCF was looking for. So I was selected by our CEO at the time to take Jim Hance's place, and then I went on the board, and that was around 2006. And I stayed on the board. I was active. I became, I chaired the audit committee, then budget and finance, and then you see the pattern, and then became vice chair of the board. And we had always had Caucasian board chairs. And that went back to the founding of UNCF, really by African Americans who said, if we want to raise big money, we got to have powerful corporate leaders. And back then, none of the powerful corporate leaders were black. The closest we came, but then he left, and he might have become the first African-American board chair was Vernon Jordan, but he left and went to run the Urban League. And so we missed that opportunity in the late 90s. As we began to grow, as I got more involved in what was going on, I was asked to become chair of UNCF. And I viewed it as a, someone said, I can't believe they never had a black chair, and da 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 da. I viewed it as a great honor because I think it recognized the fact that A, we had come far enough along to know that you don't have to be white to raise money in a big way. B, that the thought was that I could bring good leadership to the role. And so I was pleased to receive that honor. I'm also pleased to report that we're 44% along the way of raising $1 billion with a B in our capital campaign without having our annual giving go down. And so that's happened in the first 2.5 years that I've been chair, and I'm proud of that. But as I look at how that aligns with the 100, when you think about it, we mentor young people, particularly here in Atlanta, and we promote the notion of them going to college. That takes money.
Yes.
UNCF, connects through scholarships, internships, and other activities to help these young people not only get into school, but to stay in school.
Yes.
Because it's not just getting there, it's staying there and graduating.
Correct.
And the mentoring that we provide from the 100 helps reinforce. Once you get past the money, you still got kids who are saying, well, I've never been to, nobody in my family's been to college, I don't know who to call for help. We're here. That's what the 100's all about. And so I see that connection as being so important and so vital. Certainly here in Atlanta, we got proof of that, but around the country as well. And so, with the growth as well of the Collegiate 100, we now have over 70 chapters of Collegiate 100 chapters around the country. That too connects with the work of UNCF in many ways, because many of those students are in school in the Southeast and Southwest. Well, some are on the West Coast, but most of those chapters are here in the same footprint that we largely have.
No, and I agree with you. So I see that firsthand, especially working with our Collegiate 100 chapters. So the newest chapter that we've had charter is Spelman College, which of course is one of the members institutions with U Morehouse.
Exactly.
Then we also have Georgia State and Oglethorpe. And working with those students is just amazing to see the work. And like you said, if they could get the scholarship, then we support them emotionally, socially, and also mentor them through the spectrum of their career.
Great.
That's what we see the turn. And I love to see, especially with the Emerging 100, how that's come on board. And I think the Emerging 100 actually started under your tutelage as when you were chair. And I think Kevin Gooch was one of the first.
He was in the first group. Yeah, exactly.
How was that relationship at that time?
Well, it was a great relationship. Kevin's always been a go-getter. You can always tell Kevin was in the room, just couldn't tell him much. No, just kidding. Kevin's always been a leader. Ever since I've known him. It's just been a privilege to know him, and we're so proud of what he's done through the Emerging, what he did with the Atlanta chapter as president, and then now what he's doing as our general counsel at the national level and parliamentarian. And I really do lean on him because he brings a point of view that's important to have. I mean, you shouldn't just get your advice from everybody who thinks like you. You should get a range of advice, and he helps round out the range of advice that I'm able to receive as national chair.
Well, I would say when we were in Las Vegas, and that's where we had the opportunity to elect you there. But talking with the other chapters across the country, I'm originally from Oakland, California, so I actually know a lot of the members from the Bay Area chapter. And just having conversation with them, and even talking to the smaller chapters, I think is what caught my attention, because they looked at the Atlanta chapter as a gold star, meaning that they were like, some chapters were just saying, we don't have Emerging. And they were talking about how their membership, because they're older, was dwindling, and they were afraid that their chapters may close. And I know me and several other members were thinking, what could we do? And we're glad that you're there, because you spoke to it yesterday. How could we model or use what we have here in Atlanta to help support other chapters to get things started, or to support them? Because I would hate to, like you said, take charters away, especially from in-need communities that would leave a gap there. So I just know that I'm very excited about your leadership, working with you and Brother Gibbs there, how we could work as a model to help take that across the country, especially for chapters that are in need.
Right. Well, and we absolutely can, and I'm actually counting on that. I mean, one of the things that, when you think about our structure, we've got 10 districts. Within each district, there are about 10 chapters on average. So we've got about 100 chapters. And so 103 to be exact. But it starts kind of, when you talk about spreading, it starts at the district level, right? We can get the 10 chapters that are in the Georgia district together to share ideas. You range in size here in this state from the largest, Atlanta, and large, DeKalb, to the smallest down in southwest Georgia. And so the point is that how do we share those ideas, and then how do we say, hey, wait a minute, that worked, let's take it across 4 more other districts. Everybody doesn't have to be the same. Everybody gets to provide their own flavor, but there are some things that just work that others may not know. And so I'm counting on this chapter. I'm counting on your leadership to bond with our collective leadership across the country to make sure that we are getting the best of ideas and sharing them as rapidly as possible. And if I could take a small moment for a commercial here. One of the things that we said in Vegas that we would do is that we would survey the members. And just this past week, we sent a survey to every member of the 100 who was on the rolls in January. And if we missed anybody and we find out, we'll send it to them too. But we're going to receive input from as many, if all respond, as 5,000 plus members, and find out, what are we doing right? What could we do better? What are we doing wrong? To get the voice of the members. And as we do that, and as we come to you and other leaders in the movement and say, hey, here's some things we're hearing, let's talk about it. So that's where the President's Roundtable is important. And as national chair, I get to attend. I couldn't attend before because I wasn't a chapter president, but that's okay. I'm happy to attend and to listen is much or more than talk, and gather ideas and share them. And so I welcome and urge you as a leader of one of our largest chapters, and certainly a Gold Star chapter, who has a staff, and recognize that most of our chapters do not.
Correct.
And so when we look at programs and we say, well, let's roll this out. Well, we got to make sure that we roll it in a way with that committed leader and group of brothers who are committed, where the leader is keeping his files in the trunk of his car because there is no office, but they come together and meet and work with our mentees, that they are as equipped as possible to deliver what it is necessary to help those young people grow, and can learn from collegiate 100 students, from spreading the notion of the emerging 100, who can learn from idea sharing at the district level and across the chapter president's level. It is all of that. It is the combined strength that makes the biggest difference that we're finding to be the case.
We're very unique in this chapter because we have 5 generations of men. And I would say, when we look at, brothers who were born in the 40s, or even some that were born here in the 30s, and I'm thinking of just the wisdom that is in this room, how it's shared. And and I say, what I love about this chapter is that the open door policy that we go and just have discussions and share that wisdom, especially like today we had the discussion with Ambassador Young and Mayor Shirley Franklin, and then Brother Willie Clemens, who was one of the founders. But just to hear that, and to, and can you talk a little bit to that? What number one that legacy means, and also number 2, what will be your legacy as chairman as we go forward at our national level?
We mentioned earlier that there are a number of national chairmen that have come from the Atlanta chapter. Obviously Nate Goldston and Tommy Dortch and Curly Dossman, and myself. And it's easy to take that for granted.
Yes.
Okay. And so I don't think we should take that for granted. I think that taking the opportunity to hear from Chairman Emeritus Curly Dossman at the Atlanta meetings or in other chapter meetings, certainly I've received a lot of requests to hear from me. But the point is that, I think the more of that idea sharing we have, the better. The more of the history sharing we have, the better. If I look at what I would like to see happen, as I walk away 3 years from now, it would be that our 4 pillars are even more solid than they are today, that even more young people can point to the 100, and that if any city we're in, any city, and especially Atlanta, if the word mentoring comes up, that the mentoring and 100 black men go hand in hand. We have some gaps in that regard. We got some work to do, and that's okay, but we got to do the work.
Understood.
And so that is certainly a part of a legacy that I see. And that we have really built a pipeline for leadership. One of the things that I indicated was that I was running for one term, and that during that term, I'd build a bridge to the future. And so having that bridge be strong, that there are young leaders coming along who have proven leadership skills, that are taking on leadership roles and doing the work of the 100. Because this is work that has to be done. It can't be talked about.
Correct.
That would be a legacy I'd be quite proud of. And I would feel that along with our being on solid footing and financially and otherwise, which I don't take for granted, but it's just table stakes, has to be done. And that our young people are looking back and saying, my life is better because of the 100.
Yes.
Whether they went to college, whether they went into a trade, whether they formed their own business, whatever it is they did, whether they went into politics, that they were great at what they do because we helped them find their path to greatness. That indeed would be my legacy.
So maybe the closing question, I'll pose it this way. I usually ask, what will you tell yourself when you're 18? But I'm going to ask this one. And I learned this one from Oprah. So
All right.
knowing what you know today,
Yeah.
what would be some wisdom that you can impart yourself on your 18-year-old self and then your 35-year-old self?
I would tell my 18-year-old self to settle down, but to stay the course and not let anybody turn them around.
Okay.
And I kind of gave myself that advice when I was 18. I tell my 35-year-old self to plan even more for the future, both intellectually and financially. And I did okay, but I just think that as a 35-year-old, I was already involved in the community. As a 35-year-old, I was already a parent. We have 2 beautiful children that we're very proud of. Well, they're adults now, and 5 grandchildren. But I would remind myself how important it is to make sure that we understand that activity begins at home and spreads abroad.
Yes.
And I've been married to my dear wife for 48 years.
Yes.
So I tried to make sure that I had the right kind of balance. But I tell my 35-year-old self to focus on it even more. And I right now don't regret, but I might have been better if I had.
But thank you, good brother.
Thank you.
And thank you for
It's been
your
my
gift of
pleasure.
time.
Yes,
Thank you very
sir.
much.
Glad to do it.